I feel like I'm, the outsider, but we'll bring it home. There was a lot of discussion yesterday. Whatever I was planning to discuss today was covered in great lengths yesterday. But just to give a quick introduction on the African Securities Exchanges Association and the African Exchanges Linkage Project, which I run. The association is an association, obviously, of stock exchanges, about 28 member exchanges. And then of all the we have 30 exchanges in Africa, but then the association members at the moment are 28. So then we have, under the African Exchanges Linkage Project, we have 11 participating exchanges. You can see them there. We started with the 7 largest exchanges across Africa, representing each of the regions across the continent. And now we are expanding in phase 2 to onboard more members. So in the end, what we're looking to do is to integrate all the entire African capital markets sector. So going into why we're here today, or rather why I'm here today. So this session will examine how cross-border listings and regional integration can deepen liquidity, broaden the investor base, and accelerate the maturity of African markets, including REITs, from the current landscape to, an actionable policy framework. So we'll look at the state of African markets in general. So because REITs is a tradable instrument in the capital markets, it definitely then falls under this, under ASEA and under the exchange, stock exchanges mandatory. We'll talk about the liquidity imperative, and then the AELP, which guides the regional integration, cross-border listing mechanics, and then in the end, we'll just discuss a few takeaways. So African markets are characterized by, a lot of fragmentation. When they talk about us, in the rest of the world, they talk about us as emerging and frontier. And what does that mean? That we are, even though we have been operational for several years, we still have not met, we're not at the same standards as other global markets. A lot of African markets remain illiquid. They struggle to, have transactions. Some markets will go 3 days, 4 days, even a week without having any trades go through them. A fragmented landscape persists. Again, like I said, we have over 30 stock exchanges, which represent over 54 African nations. Some countries have a unified exchange for regional exchange. And then but even with all this, there is high growth potential in African markets. We are still very young. We are adaptable. We, very volatile in many cases, but also just to point out that there is always opportunity in volatility, and so that's what we're looking into. So the liquidity imperative, fragmentation is our enemy for sure. We don't have regulations that cut across the markets, even though we have done a lot of work to ensure, that we are that we comply with international standards. There's still a lot of development that needs to happen in those markets. And what does that mean? It means that suppressed trade volumes, and then which limits institutional investors from participating in the markets, in the different assets that are available in the different markets. Obviously, JSE being one of the most, it is the most advanced market in Africa, provides a wide range of investment opportunities. And also just to highlight that because of its size, because of its age also, how long it has been around, and how the amount of work that they have put into their regulations, into their processes and operations, it's still no wonder that they are, it's not a surprise that they are also the largest when it comes to the REITs investing across Africa, representing 85%. So what then are we looking to do? In ASEA, we've done research on each of the markets, all 26 of them, to find out what is it exactly that we need to do to improve, capital markets in Africa and investing across the continent. So we're looking to deepen the exchanges, capital markets to enable cross-border trading, which will enable liquidity. And so understanding all these issues that have been highlighted, then the association alongside the Africa Development Bank then came up with the African Exchanges Linkage Project. So the AELP was launched in 2022. What we have done is that, again, we started with the leading exchanges, ensuring that, once we integrate all the large exchanges, the 7, that represent the different regions, then that covered about 85% of African capital markets in terms of market capitalization. But right now, we have 11 exchanges that represent 18 countries. We have interconnected over 50 stockbrokers, and I see securities from Ghana. I know everybody has talked about the Ghana presentation. Those guys are part of the project, and then we also have Diane Blair. Cynthia was in the room. So what does this mean? We're giving investors access to all African listed securities, and so whatever it is, equity, bonds, and REITs. If you are looking to invest in another jurisdiction, what you need to do is just reach out to your broker, your local broker. Go to your broker in Kenya and tell them that you want to invest in South Africa, and then highlight, whatever it is that you're interested in investing, the different asset classes. We have it all in a unified platform. So the unified platform enables stockbrokers and investors to view the real market data in the different markets. So for example, once we get to the point where, and I will make a recommendation for how to, onboard REITs onto the African Exchanges Linkage Project. Once you list a REITs on one exchange, it will be visible and available for trading in another exchange. What we have also done is that we have started, or rather we're working on regulatory frameworks. What we have done is we have collated all the commonalities in the regulations in these markets. So that's just to say, in as much as we're fragmented, we're not really that fragmented, because we have, we all comply with the international standards. There is, just the minimum requirements for cross-border investing. And then we do advocacy for anywhere that we see that there's limitations on cross-border trading and transactions, then we do advocacy for that. And for that we already have partnerships with the African Union. We have who are our advocacy partners for advocacy through ministers of finance in the different African markets. And so this is a model that, the REITs Association can also take on. We would be happy to support on that and to also help to harmonize regulations across the continent. And so that is an opportunity that we can work with. So we have had a lot of discussions in the past days about the REITs landscape in Africa. Obviously, South Africa is the leading market for that. There's Kenya, Nigeria, and Zimbabwe. And then there's other markets like, it looks like the font was really tiny on those. But then there's Mauritius, there's Ghana, Casablanca, and Egypt that have already started working on, regulations and policies around REITs investing. So then, what is the next thing? From framework to REIT integration. Integration, again, remains, the biggest well, it's a success story for stock exchanges, for equities, but then we also, have started to work with, or rather had previous discussions with RAC on how ASEA can support policy formulation and how we can do this. So operational trading links, that is the easiest part to do. Technology usually solves very many problems. Even on our part, we got an A in tech integration. But then we got an A for effort in, like now when you start going into policy, you start going into the cross-border payments and settlement processes. So we have harmonized the operational processes, harmonized KYC, and then we're now working with the AFCFTA and other Pan-African institutions to ensure that we are able to facilitate cross-border trading, settlement, and ease of access to FX exchanges across the continent. We do have a governance framework where all the stock exchange members, the CEOs participate in the steering committee, in the executive committee, so each one of them has a stake in this. And so they work very hard to promote all the listed securities within their stock market. So what then must be done for REITs? The same thing that you talked about yesterday, and I feel like in this case I'd be preaching to the choir, because even with the regulator here, I do believe, or rather it has been demonstrated that there's a lot of work going on for policy harmonization, for taxation, for the taxation rules to be harmonized. And so what we will provide, once we get to that point, is that we, as ASEA, we will provide platforms for harmonization, platforms for collaboration, platforms for capacity building. And so working together with the REITs Association of Kenya, and then even creating a Pan-African REITs Association. I believe that is something that has already been discussed previously. So cross-border listing mechanisms, what cross-border listing does is that it enables, it opens up the investor pool so that you're able to access investors from all the different countries. And for that to happen, operational infrastructure, again, where you have the CSD, interoperability, you have trading processes, basically all tech integration. And then tax alignment, again, we've talked about that, regulatory harmonization. So each layer of this the mechanics then will enable cross-border trading, and it will improve liquidity, because that means you have access to investors across the continent. So case study, this again, preaching to the choir, you already know about this, that there are already case studies for cross listings for REITs, equities and other securities have already done cross listings. But for REITs, I believe that is a model that can be followed, where as long as a REIT in one country meets the requirements in another country, it should be seamless to do that. And once policy and regulations are harmonized, then there will be mutual recognition of all these policies, and therefore very seamless to bring integration. So the integration between, or rather the cross-listing of the REITs model then can be, replicated across other REITs. So this, obviously, Mauritius and South Africa have already been working together in so many other processes. And so if we go into regional integration, like for example, the East African integration that is already working on regulatory harmonization, then it will be a lot easier to do cross-listing between Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, Rwanda, so that if one REIT is listed at the Nairobi Securities Exchange, investors in the other East African community countries then can access that. So, there has been proof of concept, and so it's not difficult to do. Like we've talked about sandboxes, you can always start with one real estate item after another. And then, the scale of the opportunity, this is, you don't need me to tell it to you, but because you already understand that, the Johannesburg Stock Exchange, like we said, has 20 billion plus. There are many opportunities across the continent. Obviously, there is a lot of, like in Kenya, there's a lot of real estate developments now. So that means that the opportunity is massive. The African population, has been estimated that by 2100, if that's even, we might not all be here, but some of you might be, the population by then will be 4.5 billion. So it's a long-term process. Sometimes when I talk about the integration story, everybody wants integration now, but integration has to be a continuous process. So the opportunity, the people in 2100 later on will be enjoying the work that has been done now by this team. And then again, 26 exchanges, we are integrating all those markets, which will make it easier to list, to cross-list, and have investors participate in real estate investments across the continent. And then infrastructure gaps remain. Every single time, we hear the African Union, the Africa Development Bank, the Afrexim Bank talk about the infrastructure gaps across the continent. This group is already working towards that. So there is a lot of opportunities that exist, not even just within your region, but continent-wide, and even just driving investments into the continent then will be done through this. So what is the easiest model? For the African Exchanges Linkage Project model, what we do, like I said, it's a phased approach. If we think that we can integrate everything at once, then we'd be lying to ourselves. And for any kind of initiative, there has to be, persistence. You have to keep working to improve systems. So regulatory framework, that is one thing that, if you can start, I said, what I said earlier is that we started with infrastructure because that for us was the simplest, because now everybody is able to access stock markets on their phones. You're able to access all information on your phones or even just basically your computer. So if you can start somewhere and say, this is what we are providing, the AELP will provide access to listed REITs. But in this case, then, I believe in some cases, some integration processes have started with regulatory harmonization, but whichever one is the easiest for you to do, because if we say, if infrastructure is not the easiest for you to do, then move on to regulatory harmonization. If regulatory harmonization is not the easiest, then we start with the payment processes. So tier one regulatory foundation, and then fiscal and monetary alignment, that has always been a pain point, especially for the African Exchanges Linkage Project, where after we went live, people were able to pass transactions among themselves or other trades, which is the easiest part. But then when it got to the settlement process, then there was an issue because, first of all, we're dealing with multiple currencies. We're dealing with capital controls, where in some country you cannot move funds from, to other countries. You're not able to repatriate your dividend income or any other kind of income. And then in some markets, it also becomes difficult to even penetrate, to invest in those countries. So again, some of the solutions that we are working with now is the Pan-African Payments and Settlement System. The PAPS is working, it's an initiative again of the African Union and the Afrexim Bank to try and ease payments across the continent, where you can transfer African currency to another African currency. And then market infrastructure and access, again, like I said, access to information, access to data is always very key. So when we're talking about, like communicate, tell everybody about it, go forth and, talk about it. That's what we mean. That we need data that is reliable, data that is accessible, and data that is consistent. And so even, getting into starting indices that monitor REITs across the continent and other processes, then will, to be added to a lot of the indices that already exist in all these different markets, then can improve interest in the REITs. So in finishing, the key takeaways is that African capital markets are growing and the opportunities are endless. REITs, like you say, is still very young. It's only in a handful of countries, but the opportunities are endless. It's growing. Africa is growing. The capital markets environment is growing. And then cross-listing unlocks value. Like I explained, you have a wider pool of investors, you have better visibility, and you have more liquidity coming into those investments. And then integration is the future. We, sometimes again, while we are looking to integrate capital markets and other people are looking to integrate, infrastructure processes, integrate insurance, integrate everything. In the end, all these siloed integrations should work towards one integration. For the AFCFTA, I promise you, I don't work for the AFCFTA, but then we are advocates of working together. Work with your neighbor, trade with your neighbor, and trading with your neighbor should be easy. Like the same way back then, if your neighbor had milk, you went to them and you gave them beans, and that barter trade worked back then, but now we have systems that should make it easier for us to trade with each other. And I see the REITs Association of Kenya Secretariat have left the room, but ASEA is the engine for integration. ASEA, if there is anybody that would like to join ASEA, we're open, because ASEA then gives you a platform for you to access other African markets. We have annual conferences that you can participate in. We have capacity building process sessions that you can join. So I think in finishing that, those are the key takeaways, that we need to work together, work in harmony, and then make sure that whatever regulations that you're working on then integrates to the wider continental plan. And with that, I end my presentation.